Today's conversation is all about rethinking what it means to write a book, especially if you're a founder, expert, or entrepreneur. Most people approach publishing as a creative milestone, something to check off the list or a passion project that they've always wanted to complete. But what if a book could be something far more strategic? What if it could be a core business asset, one that drives authority, visibility, and real growth? That's exactly what today's guest specializes in. Cody is a book producer and an entrepreneur who helps founders and experts turn their ideas into best-selling books that don't just sit on a shelf, but they actively build their brand and business. He's produced 19 books, built a multi-million-dollar publishing ecosystem, and worked with clients in over 23 countries. What makes Travis's perspective different is that he doesn't just focus on writing. He focuses on positioning, visibility, and leverage. These elements actually determine whether a book makes an impact. In this episode, we're diving into how to think about your book like a strategic asset and how to make sure it actually works for your business. Travis, welcome to the show. Travis, welcome to the show. You often say a book should be treated as a business asset, not just a creative project. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, I think too many people go about writing a book as it's like a bucket list thing, right? And so there's this idea that we have of what a book should be. And I think for the vast majority, at least the people I work with, when we get started, they think that success of a book is only through book sales on Amazon or Ingram or, however, physical bookstores, if those are still around. But for me and almost all my other clients, the vast majority of the profits for us have come from how we leverage the book off of Amazon. So the book is a tool, and we put it on Amazon because obviously they're the biggest distributor, but the book should be designed for multiple things. It should be designed to answer most of the questions that you're getting as a business owner so that you can save off time. It should be prepping people to understand your philosophy and your framework. It should be structured in such a way that people naturally gravitate toward, they read the book and go, this is amazing, I want to work with you. So your book should also be seeded with opportunities to bring people into your, what I call your business ecosystem, whether that's getting on an email list or joining your newsletter or connecting with LinkedIn. The book really needs to be driving people into your business. And then finally, the thing that most people don't do, there's two big challenges with how they don't turn books into assets, which is one, reusing the content on social media and in their videos and their presentations. It's like this weird thing of like, oh, I wrote the book is done, and then it just kind of goes on the shelf and nobody thinks about it anymore. But the other part of it is what I call merchandising your book, right? So an analogy I'll give with that is I worked in Hollywood for 15 years. I was a screenwriter. And when you look at what Hollywood does, right, the movies are just kind of a small piece of it. So we'll use George Lucas as a good example. George Lucas, for the first 6 Star Wars movies, together they made about $4.7 billion. Right? But George Lucas controlled 100% of the merchandising. In that same period of time, for those same 6 movies, he made $28 billion in merchandising. So he made 7 times more money from leveraging the movies than he did the movies themselves. And that same principle applies to us as authors. The book is sort of the marketing tool. It's the leverage point, and it needs to be turned into other things. So what does that look like? That looks like turning the book into a video course, or turning it into a workshop, or turning it into a coaching program. Some people have turned their books into $10,000 like cohorts. They've turned it into $25,000 masterminds, right? But it all starts from a book.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's very insightful. So if someone's thinking about writing a book themselves, and before they even write a single word, are there key strategic decisions that they need to make to ensure that that book is going to support those business goals down the lines?
Sure. And there's a couple of answers to that. I think the biggest mistake that people will make is when they sit down to write a book, there's 2 kind of big mistakes I will see them make. The first one is they don't outline what they want to say. They're not clear on the goal. Right? And we hear this all the time, like, I know a lot of stuff, so I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to start writing. A lot of people do that. But the challenge of that is we're all busy. If you're married, you're in a relationship, you've got family, you got kids, you got business. So you might have a Saturday, 3 hours on a Saturday, and you sit down and you pound out a couple of chapters. Then life gets in the way, and it's 3, 5, 6 months later that you come back. Are you the same person that's writing the book 6 months later than when you started it? No, like your thought process on a lot of things usually has completely shifted. You may have found better ways to do things. And so if you attempt to write a book without plotting it out first, you end up with this book that takes 3 or 4 years to write. And by the time you get done to it and you go back to chapter 1 and you read it and you're like, oh, I got to rewrite this whole thing because a different version of you wrote that chapter. Right, so that's the first part of it. I think the second part of it is feeling like you can't put everything in the book And I hear that all the time. Oh, I don't want to put in everything in the book because if I do, then why would people hire me? And that is the biggest faulty mistake that anybody could make. And to this day, it's one of the big banes in my business when I get in conversations. We call them friendly conversations with clients that are like, I don't want to put everything. No, put everything in the book. Put all of your secrets into the book. Because if you put that much detail into your book, most people are going to be so overwhelmed because of everything there is to do that they're going to go, oh, I'll come back to that later. Right. And so, but also at the same time, when you put everything into the book, when they go, wow, this guy gave this whole process away in the book. What's it going to be like when I work with them coaching? And so I picked that up from Russell Brunson. I don't know if you know who Russell Brunson is, founder of ClickFunnels. I saw him. He did an event multiple years ago. It was called Funnel Hackathon. And really what that was his Expert Secrets book. And so it was a 4-day event. And what he did is he took you through the entire book in the event and just essentially forced you to actually do the exercises that are in the book, right? Now, you could get the book for $20 on his website. And then you're charging $10,000 for the thing. And I asked him about that. I'm like, has anybody ever complained that they paid you 10 grand just to basically walk them through everything that's in the book? And this is what he said that changed everything for me, which he said that people consume information in different ways. So some people will buy the book even though they hate reading. So then on the next page, when he offers them the video training to the book, people go, oh my gosh, I would much rather watch videos. And so they'll pay $200 or $300 for the videos. And then out of those people, there's a percentage of them that when he says, well, you got the book and you got the videos, here it is 6 months later, have you implemented anything? Oh, no, I haven't implemented. Pay me $10,000. I'll lock you in a room and I'll force you to do it. Right. And so part of that process was everything, 100% of everything was in the book was also in the workshop, but the delivery format was different. So I think if you sit down and write a book with like, well, I can't give away all of my secrets because no one will hire me, you're already sort of starting off on the wrong sort of philosophy of what you can do with them.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Actually, as you're saying that, it does remind me too a lot of content creation and digital marketing. A lot of times when people are trying to grow their own personal brand, which I think also does tie into if they wanted to write a book one day, they only share so much value because they feel like they have to keep some of the secrets to themselves too. But actually, you gain so much more trust with your audience when you do share everything with them. You find that actually very few will actually act on what you say. So you can share, all your secrets, but the amount of people that are actually going to take the information and apply it is like so small compared to what you think in your head. Like the walking through thing is really interesting that you brought up too. For so many people, doing workshops or virtual events, things like that can motivate people in such a different way. So they will pay extra to get that extra feature, to get the closeness to you because they do feel like they have the relationship from you because they already purchased the book. So I feel like it kind of continues to move down the funnel in that way, which is really interesting.
And people are funny too, right? They pay $20 for a book and they'll go through it and everything's there. But I mean, I used to work with really high level online marketers that had $5,000, $10,000 programs. Mm-hmm. And there was one program we did that was maybe 500 people went through it. It was a $5,000 program. And even with us doing 2 calls a week and giving away everything, still only 10% of people actually made it all the way through the training, even when they were paying $10,000.
Wow.
Right. And so, so it's just this idea that somebody's going to read your book and take all your stuff and implement it. I'm sure there are some freakish people out there that are able to do that. But in my experience, most people are not. And I think the other thing too, again, from my perspective, having the books that I do, just putting everything in your book so nothing like when you finish the book and you feel complete, that sets you apart from all the other authors out there. And frankly, I sort of feel like don't share everything is kind of holdover from like the bad online marketing stuff that was in 2002 to 2012, like the really sort of like used car salesmen, but they were on the internet, right? That feels like that's the mentality that's still kind of clinging onto that.
Right. That's a good point. So when someone's thinking about writing a book, and in your experience and the people that you've worked with, what are the most effective ways that the book will actually generate the revenue? So you mentioned like merchandise sales. How does that open up other business opportunities? What are other ways that they can generate income?
Well, you have to think of a book like a magic key.
Okay.
Right. So right now, if you don't have a book, there's this door in front of you. On the other side of that door, there's opportunities that you can't actually access right now because you don't have a book. So just first and foremost, just having a book, whether or not it becomes a bestseller, whether or not you don't do anything with it, automatically there's a doorway to more opportunities to you just from having a book. So from the very basic simple, it is you have a book in your industry, your opportunities now to get on stages and start speaking they're 50 times greater than if you didn't have a book. And getting on bigger stages, if you have a bestseller book, that's there, right? So you now also have a better way to capture attention. So we have strategies with some of our consultants that they only deal with like Fortune 1000 C-suite guys. Getting in front of those decision makers is really hard. If you have a book, there's actually a very simple way that you can use the book to get in front of those decision makers. Now, are all of them going to respond to you? Of course not. But if you're contacting 100 of them and you're getting meetings with 10 and you're closing 5, like that can be pretty significant, right? The other part of it is just by doing a book, it really does come down to the cliche of work once and reap multiple rewards. Because writing a book forces you to clarify your position and your thinking around that particular topic. And so you've really got to, you've got to put some time into thinking. But once the thinking is done, again, now the book, you can easily turn a book into, so I have a book called Bestseller by Design. I use a process with people that I call the movies framework. It's 6 steps. Okay. Everything's in my book, but that first chapter for M, which stands for master planning, which is how to outline a book, I've been able to turn that single chapter into a 4-hour workshop. I didn't have to do any other work than just put things in slides. And now with AI, you can just drop your chapter in there and be like, hey, create the slide deck for this, and it'll do it for you.
Right.
You've now you've worked one time, and now you're able to spin out all of these other assets from it. So whether it become, for me, I was workshop. Now, what did I do when I did the workshop? I put a camera up and I recorded the workshop. And now what do? I worked one time and now I got 2 assets out of the same thing. I made money on the workshop and now I can sell the videos of the workshop. So now I can sell my book through direct marketing, drive traffic to my own webpage. You can get the book, and on the next page I can go, hey, so the thing that slows everybody up the most is they don't outline their book. I did a 4-hour workshop. It was invite only, charged $500. By the way, do you want the video of the workshop? A couple $100. So very minimal extra effort for me to create slides and do the effort. And so when I'm trying to create products, I always start with a book, because I go to the book and now the book is done and it's like, great, I can spin this chapter into these 3 things and I can spin this into these 3 things. Nowadays with AI, like for me, I have a process. I've turned that entire process into an AI tool. So instead of me needing to look over your shoulder and help you with the book, you can go through my tool and it'll actually watch what you're doing, and like as if I was just sitting there in the room with you, helping you through all of those things, right? So depending what your niche, like for fitness trainers, my gosh, if you've got a book around fitness training, turning it into a tool where people can get in and be like, this is my age and my weight and my time. And it's like, oop, here you go. Here's everything you need to do. It can track your results. So there's a million different ways. I'm just giving you a few off the top of my head of ways that me and my clients have turned books into what I call the merchandise.
There's so many opportunities for a lot of my listeners that are especially in the marketing or digital marketing space. I think an easy way to think about this for them would be, you think about recording a podcast or recording a long form video versus, kind of spending all this time creating all this different short form content, chasing the latest trend, trying to figure out what to share. You record that long form video, you record that podcast, and then you could take that podcast, you could chop it up into a bunch of pieces. You could put it into a course, you could put it into, a mini series. You could then take it and share it as the clips from the podcast. It's kind of thinking about that, and like also the most effective use of your time. I think trying to get people's attention is like the goal for, I would say, a lot of people in marketing. But even as people are establishing themselves as their careers or as thought leaders, like producing that book gives you that layer of credibility, establishes you as a thought leader in your field. And then there's so many opportunities, like you said, later on that you could then take that one book and, break it up, share it in different ways.
The phrase I coined for that is circular marketing, is what I call it. So you create the book, and the book can become a course, which can become a workshop, and now you can, it can become a mastermind, and so you can advertise the book, which pushes into, right? So right now I'm working with a company in Boise, Idaho, and they train people how to do their own two-day workshops. And so what we're doing now is they're going and they're spending, a month to prepare their workshop. They're coming in, they're recording the workshop. So here's the workshop, we sell the workshop. The content of the workshop becomes a book. The book becomes a funnel that sells the workshop. And then now you just go, yeah. And so it's the same. And you're right. In this content saturated era that we live in, if you're doing content in any way, shape, or form and you are not repurposing it, I mean, you're just wasting that effort. And, I would love to take credit for this, but it wasn't me that came up with the original concept of repurposing. Tim Ferriss, if you know who that is, two of his last books, when you get in there at the beginning, it says, hey, these are my 50 most downloaded episodes for my podcast this year. And he just hired an editor and cleaned them up, and New York Times bestseller. So even Tim Ferriss is taking his best content and resharing it.
Yeah, it's such a great idea. If you can devote that time to getting the book done and prioritize that, there's so many opportunities that come from it, and then you can repurpose all that content. If someone writes a book and now the book's out there, what does a smart, modern post-launch strategy actually look like for them?
Well, it really depends on what the goal is for the book.
Okay.
There's multiple. So let's say that you're a speaker, right? So a speaker's going to have a completely different strategy than, let's say, someone like you who may have a course that you want people to come into, right? So there's two branches here. So if you're a speaker, the first thing you want to do is obviously create some content. The easy win is use AI tools today to take your book and just turn it into a year's worth of social media content in an afternoon. And now you can even, hire a VA that can do that for you. So that to me is still the most shocking thing that people don't do with their books is the book gets out and then they just don't do anything with it. They know it's my book. You can only get it if you're my book. And I was like, why don't you turn the book into a podcast?
Right.
Why don't you turn it into videos? Why don't you chunk it out into give a 5-minute snippet and be like, hey, you like that? Chapter 1 of my book goes deep into that. Go check that out. But so it really then becomes now to how the leverage point is what you want to look at. So how do we take this thing and leverage it, right? So if you're a speaker, one way to do it is to figure out, okay, I'm just making this, but the same chiropractor. I would look at what are all of the conventions, the big conventions in the chiropractic space that I know that I want to get into.
Okay.
So one of the strategies then would be identify the event managers, figure out who chooses the speakers. And now what we can do is you can create a targeted direct marketing campaign where the phrase is lumpy mail, if you're familiar with direct marketing, the Gary Halbert days, where you create a package that's sort of so compelling that it's going to get people to open it. So you send that type of package to the event coordinator with a nice letter on nice letterhead that's with your book. Now the event coordinator's got two piles of speakers. Here's everybody without books. Here's everybody with books. Where do you think you fall in this category of people with books? You're right at the top of the pile, and you didn't really do much more than just went out and spent 10 minutes to get some nice stationery, because nobody does nice stationery, nice envelopes anymore. Such an 80s thing to do that. But the same will work if you're a consultant. So again, my clients that works with the, Fortune 1000, creating a version of that, but geared towards the C-suite of them. We've seen some really phenomenal response rates from doing so. Obviously that type of marketing is a little more expensive than running Facebook ads,
Right.
but it's much more personalized. And so you get a much bigger response. Now, the most common thing for anybody that's in consulting or in marketing, or they're a creator, is turning the book into a simple funnel. So you sell your book for, $10, $20, your content, your ads are running to that page, and you're bringing people in and they buy the book, and then you say, okay, well, I also have this other thing and this other thing and this other thing. And then on the back end, now they're in your ecosystem, and now you can start marketing to them with all of the other stuff that you're doing, right? So let's say that you're somebody who does retreats 3 times a year. So you write a book around that particular topic. We get it published. Now you run ads to the book, and in the book you come in and maybe you turn the book into a video course and a simple workshop, and that's it. So let's say that you can get to the point where you can spend $100 on ads and you make $100 from every person that buys your book. So now you have a free lead coming in. That's not life-changing, but if you're doing a $5,000 retreat every 4 months, and every 3 months you're bringing in 1,000 to 1,500 new people, and now you're marketing your retreat to them, that's how your retreats can start to get to the point where they're sold out and on the wait list. And again, you created all of that movement just from having a simple book on the topic. And there's one other thing about it, because people ask me yeah, but it's a book. I had an 8-figure marketer tell me a while back where he said, in this age of sort of content saturation, a book is the only remaining low ticket item that still has a very high perceived value. And so I've seen people create six-figure incomes with books. The one that blew me away was it's not even my client, but I met him through Russell Brunson, where he has hot dog carts. So he was making six figures with hot dog carts, and somebody asked him what to do, and so then he wrote a book, and then he has a training program that teaches people how to start their own hot dog cart business. He's making multiple six figures a year just selling people out of debt.
What book is this? Because I feel like you've read
I don't remember. If you get on Amazon and look, how to have a successful hot dog cart business, he's probably the only guy that's still got that. So this other idea of like, oh, my market is too niche. I make $500,000 a year just showing people how to have hot dog carts.
Yeah.
Right. So it works for everything. Yeah, it works for literally everything. There's somebody that I just came across on Instagram, and I forget her name because she's brand new. She makes six figures a year as a traveling cat sitter. And she didn't write a book, but she did write an ebook that's all about like, how do you make six figures as a travel? And now she's got like a multiple six-figure business and it all based off of, like, if I was her, I know that, doing an ebook, let's get the ebook and give it away for free. I would say, even if you're going to do that, expand it a little bit, put it on Amazon. It's not much more effort. And now you have a real book, right? Now, here's the other thing too. Right? I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep going off on tangents here, but
good.
I hear all the time, like, oh, I need to have a real book, right? The book needs to be this. And the publishing industry will tell you, like, oh, you need to have 50,000 words for it to be a real book. I'm playing around with something right now that are called pocket guides.
Pocket guides.
Look at these. So this is going to be 5 books. And what I did is I took my core book and I've just now broken it down into sections, like, oh, well, what if you just want to know how to plan your book? Or what happens if you just want to edit your book? This is a 4x6, right? Each of these books is about 125 pages. It feels significant. But now it becomes a marketing tool, and it's easy for some people to consume. And I think that's the other thing too, that at least in the last 5 years, I've noticed the shift in consumption, is that people are tired of content and they're tired of information and they're craving implementation.
Yeah.
So if you can write a book that is 10,000 words long and it's 95%, here's just how to freaking do the thing, people are going to love that book more than the book that's 50,000 words that is, 80% like philosophy and 20% of here's what to do.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you touched upon a few things there. So the first one that I really liked was about personalized marketing. Right now, especially in this totally AI era where there's so much AI content, there's so much AI just everywhere. People are craving that personalized marketing, and that really helps to be a differentiator. We're going to see a lot of people leaning into that. I actually just spoke with the founder of a company called Handwritten, and they write like handwritten notes and send them out.
That's fantastic. So
it was a really interesting conversation. We forget about the other ways to get your message out there or to connect with people, and sending something in the mail, sending a physical copy of a book, like, makes a huge difference. I think, yes, it might be easier to write up an ebook, but to actually be able to have a tangible copy of something, it just makes such a difference for people. And then I also like to touch upon, like the attention spans and breaking down content into something that's more consumable. So those shorter books that you brought up, like the pocket guides, I think that's something that is going to be a really interesting trend, because right now, and especially with business books in particular, you could there's a lot of fluff in a lot of them, and you sit there and you read them, you start them, and then maybe you put them down, and you don't actually get to the part where you can learn about how to implement something until the middle or pretty much the end of the book. And then by then you kind of lost a lot of people. So I think that's a really interesting takeaway about how, like, getting to the point quicker.
The Amazon statistics back that up. Like, like, especially with Kindles, anytime a book gets over 40,000 words, like, completion rate just goes, and over 50, if a book's over 50,000 words, like, the completion rate of it is like stupid. It's like 8% of the people actually finish the book.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird thing where people still have this belief of, like, more content means more authority, and it's not. And I saw this with a marketer, Perry Marshall. Perry Marshall wrote a book a number of years ago called the 80/20 Sales and Marketing Guide. And he really doubled down on this, the whole 80/20. Like, he started showing you how it applies to everything. And he was writing a new book, and he had a co-author on the book. And the book got up to about 45,000 words. And his co-author stopped and said, well, wait a minute. Aren't you the 80/20 guy? Why are we writing a 50,000 word book? Like, what's the 20% of this book that gives them the...
Right.
And so they spent 2 months completely gutting the book out, and they ended up with like a 9,500 word book.
Wow.
And that actually made me look at my books going, do I really need all these stories? Do I really need all this sort? And you know what came out of that? manga guy. I'm like, how do I distill my stuff down into like, here's a little bit of context, but here's how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're headed. And to your point about the age of AI, a number of months ago, I was on a live stream with a marketer who's considered probably one of the top two or three AI guys in the space.
Okay.
He's doing stuff that's so advanced that you just look at it and your brain hurts. And somebody asked him, I was like, oh man, in this age of AI, how do I have how do I create my advantage? I feel like I'm getting left behind. And it was funny because what he said was, in the age of AI, your unfair advantage is to just become more human, because everybody's going to start to default to the machines and they're going to stop being authentic. And I think we're seeing that now. Like, a lot of people ask me, like, what's the big move? Like, how do you know a book's going to do well? How do you know a marketer's going to do well? What's the unfair advantage? And is it just be authentic? People, I think, are craving authenticity. I think after 10 years of sort of the shiny gloss, social media bros, people are like, no, can I just have a real person?
Right. Yeah, and that applies to a lot of things too, right? So even if you're trying to contact customer service and you get an AI chat box, I feel like so many people are like, can I please just actually speak to someone? When you're reading, can I please just have someone tell me how to do some things? Which I guess also goes back to hosting those workshops or those in-person events. You just want a real person to tell you how it actually worked for them and how you can do it. And I feel like that's going to be the advantage moving forward, is like you said, just being a human.
It was funny because for the longest time there, people were saying, I say people, marketers specifically were saying like, oh, live events are kind of dead. And then, they're really struggling. And then COVID happened and they were really like, yay, we can move everything into live virtual events. And then after 2 years, they're like, my numbers are down. I'm not making as much money. And people are like, can I go somewhere and like hang out in a room with real people? And so
Right.
now, like, the guys that were really good at event marketing, live events, that they're doubling down on the live events, because people are, what's the one thing that you can't duplicate with AI? Experience. You can't replace an experience, and getting in a room with somebody is, one of the final remaining ways of being able to go experience something. And I think to an extent with Hollywood, it's the same, right? People go, oh, movie theaters are dying. And I was like, yeah, but going to a movie theater still is one way to experience something different than just watching it from home.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of background too, like I went from field marketing to digital marketing, and I've seen the
Wow.
combination too. So being out in the field and talking to people has been something that you get such a different experience, because yes, people can provide reviews or share their feedback online, but you don't get the actual real little feedback until you actually talk to people about things. In-person events, I think, are a lot of businesses too are shifting to start to add that into their strategy. People are looking to get more involved locally and to get to know the people behind the businesses. So even thinking about get to know the author behind the book, you feel more connected to it. So just one example we just were talking about was like a local restaurant opens up, and then the chef from that restaurant maybe reaches out and sends a note, direct mail, to everybody local in the area and introduces himself. Now you feel like you know the restaurant, you feel like you know the chef, and you're so much more likely to go there. At least I am, in my opinion. Because you feel like you know the person behind it. And I feel like that's kind of the direction we're seeing marketing going, which is, you're right, the opposite of what it's been doing the last few years.
I think we're getting back to, and there's science that kind of backs this up. So a number of years ago, there was a book written called Generations, and then they followed it up with a book in the early 90s called The Fourth Turning. And I'm not going to go into the backstory of it, but the gist of it is these guys identified that history repeats itself in sort of 4 cycles of about 20 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it resets. So he was like, so when you're looking at society, how can you determine like where we're at? And he's like, well, just go back 80 years and look at society, because the things that were resonating then will now. And the reason I'm bringing that up is he talked about right now we're in sort of the 4th phase, which is a wrapping up of all the sort of dysfunction of this last 80 years, which is why I think we're seeing a lot of chaos, right? But he said one of the big drivers in society during this time is that community is going to be the thing that gets you through and to survive and to thrive. And I think we're seeing that, right? Like, especially again, after the last 10 years of everybody going into this virtual social media world. And then people are like, but my friends, we talk about when we were, pre-Facebook, or right when Facebook was coming out, like, we never did live calls. We never did face calls. It was like, let's get together and go to a movie, go miniature golf, go bowling, just hang out at a restaurant. And how that really doesn't happen to the extent that it used to, right? And so now people are like, I miss, even if I just have a core group of 4 or 5 friends that we're getting together with once or twice a month, right? That small little community, I think, is what people are craving. Now, as business owners, that's good to know, because we can be authentic, we can be more human, we can be more vulnerable, and we can create a community for people to come belong to. And now you don't have any competition because you're not competing with anybody, because nobody is you and nobody can have the community. You could be in the reddest ocean industry possible, but if you are authentic to yourself and speak from the heart and have authenticity, you are going to have your, the phrase, right? 1,000 true fans. You'll have enough to have a fantastic lifestyle with just that, where, some of these, again, you get on social media, like, I got to have 100,000 followers. And it's like, well, if you have 1,000 true fans, I don't really need that. And we see that all the time, right? There's somebody I knew who had about 1,600 people on his X following, and he was doing 350, 400,000 a year from that small group, right? And there's a guy I know that's got 2 million followers on X, and he's doing like 10 grand a month.
Yeah. It's really interesting too about that. I know follower count and like metrics, people chase those, and then it's so interesting to see the actual results from like influencer campaigns and be like, okay, well, it's great that they have a large audience, but if you have a small audience that's actually connected and cares about what you have to say, it's so much more valuable. We're seeing a whole shift with influencer marketing too, and even back to small local events where they're actually inviting their customers in instead of inviting an influencer or someone, because they want other people in the area that they can trust to talk about it, which may not be someone with a huge following. It may be just their friend that they know that went to some event for companies.
Yeah, it's always interesting to watch this stuff, the cycles that it goes in, right? Like, because it was email marketing, and then email marketing was dead, and it's all about social media. And so, Gary Vee comes along and is like, content, you got to be, doing 30 hours of content a day. And then everybody does all of that. And then, like, it's funny now because now I'm seeing all the like 20-year-old kids where they're like, so you don't own social media. You really need to have a newsletter. Well, what's a newsletter? An email list.
Right.
So like, if you just would have been a guy that got in 2006 and stuck with email marketing, 20 years later, you would still be doing email marketing, and everybody else is going crazy and losing businesses and getting slapped and doing all this stuff. And you'd just be doing all right. Yeah, what is an email list? Small community of people that know, I can trust you.
Yep. That's a good point. And then it also goes back to the people that originally started blogging back in the day, which is me. You have a website, and then you keep the website up, because now the website is what's really valuable and what it's pulling from all the search engines. So everybody wants a website, but we went from website to nope, you got to be on social, you got to share all these short form videos. So you're right, it's very cyclical. So when it comes to a book getting seen, and we just kind of touched upon this a little bit, what would you say is the balance between having a personal brand, a platform, maybe making strategic partnerships? Like, how should authors really think about that?
So having an author brand versus like a business brand?
If someone writes a book and they want to be a thought leader in that field,
sure.
They have
well, partnerships are always a great thing to do, because you can leverage, people's influence. That's one of the reasons why forewords in a book are still a big deal. Like, can I get, Tony Robbins to write the foreword of my book? Because there's a sort of perceived, well, if Tony Robbins is writing the forward for this book, you can. But branding is important. And I think personal branding more than ever, which for the longest time, I know it was like build your company around the brand. But even if you've got a really successful business, I mean, going back to Steve Jobs is a good example. Apple was his company and his brand, but he also was very intentional on creating Steve Jobs as a brand. Right. And I think you need both. And part of the reason is, especially if you're in a SaaS company, or you have something that the whole idea is you want to build it and you want to exit it. I've worked with 2 founders in this last year where they were the company, right? Yeah, my company, I'm grinding and hustle and all the crazy. And then the company sold, and they're like, hey, you're not part of the company anymore because we bought you out. And suddenly their whole identity was like gone. And so now, why did they write a book? The book then now was for them to pivot from, I'm the guy that used to be this, to like, let me share my philosophy of me as a person that allowed me to create that and show you how it applies to everything else. And so again, from that perspective, right, a book now becomes a fantastic tool to allow you to pivot, because it allows you to own space. You'll hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. People finding me on LinkedIn are like, yeah, Travis, but yeah, I've got 20 years experience in this field, and yeah, I know a lot, and sure, I helped Pixar make $1 trillion. But there's a million books on business consulting, so who's going to read a book from me? But that's the wrong philosophy, because it's forgetting the core function, which is the authenticity. Right? Your experiences, and no one else has had them. And so I don't know if you've had this experience, but I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to personal development. I love going like Tony Robbins events and NLP and hypnosis. Like, I love going to that stuff, right? And there was a time where I was going, and you would go to the conference and you'd hear the guy saying the thing. I'm like, yeah, I know that. And in the next while, the guy's saying, well, this thing's important. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. And then somebody comes up and they like start and they tell you this story of like, let me tell you this story. And I had this thing and I had this realization. And then I realized like X. And it's the same thing that everybody else has been saying, but suddenly you go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, now I understand what that means. Mm-hmm. And so there's a difference between knowing something and understanding it. And so for you, your personal story, that could be that branch break for someone going from, I know this to, oh my God, I understand this, and now I see how I need to apply it. Right. And that's the biggest differentiator between it. You know how many people teach others how to write and publish books? I know of at least 300 different guys. Some of these companies are working with 400 or 500 books a month. Right. It's crazy. What's the process of writing a book? Exactly the same. You got to plan it. You got to draft it. You got to edit it. There is zero difference between how someone else teaches how to write a book and how I teach to write a book. But you know what I have that no one else has? I have the movies process. And what is the movies process? The movies process is my framework showing you how when you look at a book like a movie, instead of a book, it makes the process easier. So what do I mean by that? Well, how does a movie work? You got pre-production, which is planning. You got production, which is actually making it. You got post-production, which is making it pretty. Now, on a feature film, 18 months to build that thing, 6 months of pre-production, probably a year post-production. Do you know how long the production of a movie is? The part that gets all the sex appeal and all the videos and where everybody gets, it's like 3 months. Wow, so the shortest part of that entire process is the actual making of the movie. Wow. And it's the same with a book. People think a book should take me a year and a half, 2 years, which is why a lot of people feel like I don't have the time to write a book. I don't have time to focus on something for 2 years. But when you do it right, the actual production of the book itself is the shorter process. So like for my process, I can get people through a draft in about 10 to 12 hours. Now, here's the trade-off to that. You're moving fast, but it's very much a rough draft. But the beautiful thing is it's out of your head. And now what do? We're moving into a phase where you can bring in other experts, editors that can polish it for you. Right? Just like a movie does. Steven Spielberg shows up on set and shoots the thing. And I don't know if you've ever seen this behind the scenes of Steven Spielberg on a sci-fi movie, but it's a bunch of grown adults in Halloween costumes in front of a blue screen, fake fighting. It looks stupid. That's what he actually filmed the day of filming, right? Wow. But now that goes to this process, and Steven Spielberg doesn't edit. He doesn't do the CGI. Right. He doesn't do the special effect. Now he oversees that. But at the end of the day, when you go to the movie theater, what does it say? Filmed by Steven Spielberg. Right. So when you are thinking about a book, that's how you need to think about it. You need to think about it as you're the director, get through it quickly, and then oversee and let somebody else come and polish it. And so I always make the joke of like, what's the difference between a writer and an author? A writer sits in isolation, banging their head against the wall, trying to figure out if what they wrote is any good. And an author works with a team of people to get things done.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And as we wrap up this episode, having produced 19 books, what are any patterns or traits that you've noticed amongst the most successful authors that you've worked with?
Getting to the point of realizing that things are okay being good enough.
Okay.
And that's the difference between people that publish a lot and people that take 5 years for a book. It's like, there is very much a societal fear of like, oh, what if I put a book out there that's not very good and it could embarrass me? That people say that all the time. Oh, it's got to be perfect. What if I have one typo wrong in the book? And I used to be that way. My first book took me 2 years. The second one took me 19 months. And my third book, I got a traditional publishing deal. I was obsessed. Like, oh my God, I got a publisher. This is a big deal. I got to do. And so even though they had a team of editors, I still spent a stupid amount of money on my own. And I had a couple more editors go through it. And like, I had more friends and family read that book than anybody. And we get it and we publish it and it's live and they send me my box of books and I get the physical book and I open it up and there was 3 typos in the first 5 pages. And I'm like, it was like 40 people. Look at this thing. 6 of them were editors. How do we? And that's when I realized, like, if you keep looking for that, that's the difference between having somebody's got 19 books and somebody who's only got 1. Is you can keep trying to find those things. Here's the other thing with that book that made. So first off, we had the typos, and then that book was called 30 Days Unplugged, and I got a Goodreads review. Which when that book came out, getting a Goodreads review was really, really hard to do. And so I got the review and it was 3 stars. And they went through and they said, well, I like this and I like this and I like this, but I'm only giving it 3 stars because it's not very well written. All right, cool. Knife in the heart. I just experienced what everybody is worried about. Oh my God, I'm going to embarrass myself. Right. 2 weeks later, I get an email. Hey, the review changed from 3 stars to 4 stars. Okay, what happened? So I go back to Goodreads and it's like update. I found myself coming back to this book again and again over the last 2 weeks and applying the things that he teaches, and I'm noticing a positive difference in my life. So I'm upgrading my review to 4 stars. And then in parentheses, to get the final dig in, she said, but it's still not very well written. And I sat with that for a minute and I said, well, do I want to be the guy that's got the Pulitzer Prize that no one ever read my freaking book? Or do I want to be the guy that somebody just said, your book changed my life? And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm okay with having a book that changes people's lives, even if they didn't think it was very well written. And I think the part of the reason was that book was very much stream of consciousness, and it was dealing with a lot of journals that I had been keeping at the time. And so I think the casual nature for her, that's the justification I'm using why she felt that way. But yeah, so I think perfectionism is the number one thing that keeps people from publishing. And it's the number one thing that keeps people, that'll make them take 3 years to write a book when they could do it in 3 months instead.
That's some great advice. That can apply to a lot of people that are looking to start a business, publish a book, put themselves out there on social media, whatever it is. And thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today. I really appreciate your time. I think there's a lot of great takeaways for my audience. I'm really excited to get this message out there.
Great. If people want to see more of my content and kind of see what our philosophy is, if they go to book.bestsellerbydesign.com, that's book.bestsellerbydesign.com. I've got 4 or 5 hours worth of my live events on there. If you see some of my short form content, you can access some of my books. So if this is interested in them, they like the philosophy, that's the best way they can dive a little bit deeper.
I think the biggest takeaway here is that a book, when done right, isn't just something that you write, but it's something you build into your business. If you've been thinking about writing a book, hopefully this episode gave you a completely new lens on how to approach it. Maybe more strategically, maybe more intentionally, and maybe with a clear vision that you can actually use to support your growth. Travis, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. To everyone listening, if you found this episode valuable, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone who's been talking about writing a book, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until next time, keep showing up, keep creating, and keep building your story.